We cut our daughter off for 5 years after believing her sister's lie that she dropped out of medical school. We didn't attend her residency graduation or her wedding. Last month, her sister was rushed to the ER. When the attending physician walked in, my wife grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. 4 plates, a story of what we almost lost forever. My name is Diane Roulette. I'm 61 years old, and I'm writing this because my daughter saved my other daughter's life, and I didn't even know she was a doctor. I need you to sit with that for a moment. My child. The one I carried, the one I fed, the one whose science fair ribbon I did not drive 3 hours to watch her receive. She became the chief of trauma surgery at one of the busiest hospitals in Connecticut. She graduated medical school. She completed her residency. She got married. She built an entire life. A real, full, beautiful life. And I missed all of it because I chose to believe the wrong daughter. Before I go any further, if you've ever looked back at a decision and realized the full weight of what it cost, stay with me. Because this is not a story about a villain. This is a story about a mother who loved both of her children and somehow, through cowardice dressed up as peacekeeping, managed to lose one of them for 5 years. Let me take you back. Jerry and I raised 2 daughters in Hartford, Connecticut. Salt of the earth, middle class. The kind of family that went to church on holidays and kept disagreements behind closed doors. We valued appearances. We valued obedience. We were not, I understand now, the kind of parents who knew how to make space for a quiet child. Monica was easy to love loudly. She was 3 years older, funny, social. The girl who could walk into any room and make adults laugh within 60 seconds. She performed and we applauded, and none of us ever thought to ask whether performing was all she knew how to do. Irene was different, nose in a textbook at Thanksgiving while Monica held court. She wasn't difficult, she wasn't rebellious, she was just still, waiting, watching. And I told myself that stillness meant she was fine, that she didn't need what Monica needed, that the quiet ones are always fine. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about that every single day for 18 years, and I dressed my wrongness up in the language of fairness. She's independent. She doesn't need as much. She prefers it this way. She didn't prefer it. She adapted to it. There's a difference, and I know that now in a way that keeps me up at night. There was a science fair when Irene was in 8th grade. She was the only child from her school to qualify for the state competition. Same weekend, Monica had a community theater performance. We went to Monica's show. We told ourselves Irene understood. She came home with a 2nd place ribbon. Jerry glanced at it and said, "That's nice, Renee." He didn't ask what her project was about. I didn't ask either. I've thought about that ribbon 1,000 times in the past year. The day the acceptance letter came from Oregon Health and Science University, something shifted in our house. Jerry read it at the kitchen table, and I watched his face do something I hadn't seen it do for Irene before. "Oregon Health and Science," he said slowly. "That's a real medical school. I called my sister that night. I called 2 neighbors. I called Aunt Ruth. Irene got into medical school. Can you believe it? And I heard something in my own voice I'm ashamed to say had never been pointed at my younger daughter before. Pride. Pure, undiluted pride. Irene sat across the table at dinner that night. She was glowing, quietly, the way she did everything. Without performance, without announcement. I looked at her and thought, there she is. As if she'd been hidden this whole time and I'd only just found her. I glanced at Monica. She was smiling. Her mouth was smiling. Her eyes were doing something else entirely. Something I noticed and filed away and then forgot on purpose. Because noticing it would have required me to act on it, and acting on it would have been uncomfortable. And uncomfortable was not something Jerry and I were practiced at tolerating. That is the first place I failed her. Not the blocked number, not the returned letter. Here, at this dinner table, when I saw the look on my older daughter's face and chose not to see it. The call from Monica came on a Tuesday night in October of Irene's 3rd year of medical school. I want to be precise about how Monica delivered it, because the delivery was the whole architecture of it. She didn't accuse. She expressed concern. Her voice was soft, weighted with the particular sadness of someone who has been carrying a terrible secret out of love. "Mom, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this. I didn't want to worry you, but I can't keep it anymore. It's not fair to you and Dad. She told us Irene had dropped out, that there was a boyfriend, someone with a drug problem, that Irene had been lying to us for months about still being enrolled, that she was embarrassed, that she was in a situation she didn't know how to get out of. She said she had proof. Messages. She offered to show us. Jerry and I sat at the kitchen table, and I watched my husband's face close like a door being locked from the inside. His jaw set. His eyes went flat. And I did not say, wait. I did not say, let's call Irene first. I did not say, this doesn't sound like her. I said, oh, Monica, how long have you known? That is the second place I failed her. The most significant one. The one I go back to in therapy every single week and turn over in my hands like a stone I can't put down. Because in that moment I had a choice, and I chose the daughter who was standing in front of me, performing grief, over the daughter 3,000 miles away who didn't know her world was about to end. Jerry called Irene that same night. I got on the line. She said, Dad, that's not... He said, Monica showed us the messages. She showed us proof. She said, I'm sitting in a hospital right now. I'm taking care of my friend. I said, how could you lie to us for a whole year? I said that to my daughter, while she was sitting in a hospital watching her best friend fight cancer. I said, how could you lie to us, because Monica had told me she would have a story ready, and when the story arrived, a sick friend, a leave of absence, documented paperwork. I heard it as exactly that. A story. She said she could show us the paperwork. She gave us the dean's phone number. Jerry said, enough. And he hung up. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. That was all she got. Then we blocked her number. I want to explain why, but I can't. Not really. I've tried to find the explanation in therapy, and what Dr. Rena keeps bringing me back to is not a reason but a pattern. We had spent 18 years accepting Monica's version of Irene. So when Monica handed us this version, troubled, dishonest, in over her head, it didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a confirmation of something we'd been half believing all along. That is a devastating thing to admit about yourself as a mother. Over the next 5 days, Irene called 14 times. I need you to understand that we knew she was calling. Jerry's phone showed the number before he blocked it. Mine did too. We watched the calls come in and we did not answer them, and I told myself this was strength, holding a line, not being manipulated. She sent emails. The first one was short, the second one was long. It had her leave of absence paperwork attached, the dean's direct phone number, her friend's oncologist's name, every piece of evidence a reasonable person would need. I didn't open them. I deleted them from the folder without reading them. I told myself that if the evidence were real, she would have led with it instead of with excuses. She mailed a handwritten letter. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope when it arrived. I wrote return to sender and sent it back. My handwriting. My hand. Aunt Ruth called Jerry. She said Irene had a leave of absence, that she was caring for a dying friend, that there was documentation. Jerry told her to stay out of it and hung up. Not once in those 5 days did either of us call Monica to ask follow-up questions. Not once did we call the medical school. Not once did we look up the dean's number that Irene had provided and dial it. We simply decided, and then we locked the decision in place with silence. Sarah Mitchell died on a Sunday morning in December. We didn't know that. We didn't know Sarah existed really. Monica had mentioned a roommate once, dismissively, but nothing more. We didn't know that Irene was the only person in the room when Sarah died, that she organized a funeral for 6 people, that she stood at the front of a chapel that could hold 60 and delivered a eulogy to rows of empty pews. We didn't know that the same night, alone in their apartment, Irene found a card tucked inside a textbook. Finish what you started. Become the doctor I know you are, and don't you dare let anyone, especially your own blood, tell you who you are. We didn't know that she opened her laptop and filled out the re-enrollment form. We were not there for any of it. Not because we couldn't have been. We had her email address, we had the dean's phone number written on a piece of paper we'd thrown away. We could have picked up the phone any day of those 5 years and said, I want to hear your side. We didn't. Irene graduated from medical school. We weren't there. She completed her residency. We weren't there. Aunt Ruth went, stood in the photograph, was the only family member in the frame. She called us afterward, voice careful. Jerry, Irene graduated. She's in residency now. She's a surgeon. Jerry told Ruth she was being manipulated, that Monica had explained all of this, that the whole story about school was how Irene justified her choices. He said this with absolute confidence, the confidence of a man who had decided and could not unside. Monica told us when Ruth's call came up at dinner. She's just trying to cause drama. You know how she is. She means well, but she doesn't know the whole story. And we nodded. We accepted it. We passed the potatoes. Irene got married. Nathan Caldwell, a civil rights attorney. His father walked her down the aisle. We received an invitation. I know this because Monica mentioned it, not with guilt, but with a kind of practiced sadness. She invited them. I told her they wouldn't come, but she had to try. You know how she is. We never saw the invitation. I don't know what happened to it. I suspect I know. We did not attend our daughter's wedding. Nathan's father walked her down the aisle. I could stop right here. Everything. Else, I tell you, lives in the shadow of that sentence. 5 years passed. At every holiday, Monica performed the grieving older sister with precision. We don't really talk about Irene, she'd say to cousins, shaking her head, lowering her voice. It's too painful for Mom and Dad. She told our mother's side of the family that Irene was homeless. She told Uncle Pete's wife she'd heard Irene was in and out of rehab. She told me on a Christmas Eve 2 years ago that she had tried to reach out to Irene and been refused. That Irene was the one who'd cut us off. That Irene hated us. I believed her. Jerry believed her. We believed her because we had always believed her. And because the alternative, that we had destroyed our relationship with our younger daughter based on a lie, was too enormous to look at directly. And so we looked away. I cooked Monica's favorite meals at Thanksgiving. I drove to her apartment when she went through her divorce. I called her first when she went through her divorce. Something went wrong and she answered, and she was there, and she was the daughter who stayed, and I was grateful for it. I did not think about who had made sure she was the only one left to stay. Aunt Ruth called me on a Thursday morning in January. Diane, she said, there's something I need to tell you about Monica. Something concerning. Her voice had a quality I hadn't heard before. Not anger, not drama, but the careful weight of someone who has been holding something too long and has finally decided to set it down. Before she could finish, she said she had to go. Something had come up. That evening my phone rang. It was Monica's number. Then it was an unfamiliar number. Then it was a Hartford area code I didn't recognize. Then finally a hospital. Mercier's Medical Center. Mrs. Boulette, your daughter has been in an accident. You should come now. Jerry drove. I sat in the passenger seat in my bathrobe and slippers on the wrong feet, and I prayed in a way I hadn't prayed since I was a child. Please. Please. She's all I have. I thought that. I said it out loud to Jerry at some point in that drive, and neither of us registered what it meant. She's all we have. We ran into the hospital. A nurse named Carla met us with professional calm and told us the trauma team was already with Monica. The chief was handling it personally. Jerry grabbed her arm. Get me the chief now. Carla glanced through a glass partition toward the trauma bay and then back at Jerry and said, Sir, the chief is prepping for surgery. You'll be updated as soon as possible. Through the partition glass, I could see a figure in scrubs, gowned and gloved, reviewing something, moving with the focused economy of someone who has done this 10,000 times. A badge on the scrub top, block lettering I couldn't read from the waiting room. They took us down the hall to the surgical waiting area. Jerry kept turning around, looking through every window we passed. She's all we have, he said again to no one. We sat, we waited. It was the longest 3 hours and 40 minutes of my life, and during all of it, the person on the other side of those OR doors was Irene. We didn't know that yet. The double doors to the waiting room opened at 6:52 in the morning. A woman walked through them in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down, scrub cap off, hair back. She carried herself like someone who owned the room, not through aggression but through simple certainty. The posture of a person who has learned to take up exactly the space they've earned and not 1 inch more. Jerry stood, he always stands. It's a reflex. Doctor, how is she? Is Monica? He stopped. His eyes had dropped to her badge, then risen to her face, then dropped to the badge again. I looked half a second later. The badge read, Dr. Irene Hewlett. MD, FACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery. I want to try to describe what happened inside me in those 5 seconds, but I'm not sure language is adequate to the task. It wasn't just shock, though it was shock. It wasn't just shame, though it was that too. Immediately, physically. I felt it in my hands first, the way you feel a sudden drop in temperature. It was the particular sensation of a story you've been living inside suddenly revealing itself as wrong. Not slightly wrong, completely foundationally wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't just change the ending. It reframes every single moment that came before it. My right hand found Jerry's forearm and clamped down. I held on with a force I didn't know I had. He didn't move. My daughter, my quiet daughter, the one with a textbook at Thanksgiving, the one whose ribbon we didn't drive to see, the one I had written a return to sender on an envelope addressed to in her own handwriting, was standing in front of us in surgical scrubs, having just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes saving her sister's life. And the first thing she said to us was, Mr. and Mrs. Hewlett, not Mom, not Dad. Mr. and Mrs. Hewlett. I felt that like a physical thing. The removal of the title. The clinical, professional, careful distance. She had spent the night rebuilding what the accident had torn apart. And now she was standing in front of the people who had spent 5 years dismantling her. And she was giving us the same words she would give any family in that room. She told us Monica had a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. She told us surgery was successful. She told us Monica was stable in the ICU, that we could see her in an hour. Her voice was even. No shaking, no tears. Then I moved toward her. My arms were already lifting. A reflex older than thought, a mother reaching for her child. I said her name. She stepped back. Half a step, polite, unmistakable. My hands hung in the air between us and then dropped to my sides. Jerry tried to speak, but Monica said, and then his mouth opened and closed and opened again, and for the first time in 35 years of marriage, I watched my husband be unable to finish a sentence. What exactly did she say? Irene asked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She told us quietly, calmly, in a waiting room with 2 other families in the corners and a nurse watching through a partition with her hand pressed to her mouth, exactly what Monica had told us. That she dropped out. The boyfriend. The homelessness. The refusal to make contact. None of it was true, she said. Not a single word. Then she told us about the calls, 14 of them in 5 days. The emails with the paperwork attached, the handwritten letter, Ruth's intervention, and what Jerry had said to Ruth on the phone. She recited it. Facts cleanly. No volume. Jerry said, "This isn't the time or place. Irene, your sister is in the ICU." "I know," she said. "I just spent 3 hours and 40 minutes making sure she survives." "So, yes, Dad, I'm aware of where she is. He had nothing. For the first time in his life. And I say this having been married to him for 36 years. My husband, a man who has never been at a loss for a decree, had absolutely nothing. She told us about the returned letter, about recognizing my handwriting on the envelope. I pressed my fist against my mouth. Then she left, measured steps, spine straight. She didn't turn around. I reached for the back of a chair to keep from falling. Jerry stood at the window, his back to me, his back to the room. His shoulders were shaking. I heard myself say, "Jerry, what have we done?" And my husband of 36 years said nothing. Not because he was refusing to answer. Because he was crying, silently, facing the parking lot, for the first time in his adult life that I had ever witnessed. That was when I understood the full dimension of what we had done. We went into Monica's room an hour later. She was awake, groggy from the anesthesia, eyes tracking to the ceiling and back. She looked thinner, smaller. The confidence she always wore had been surgically removed along with the damaged tissue. And what remained was the face of a 35-year-old woman who had just realized she was out of room. Jerry stood at the foot of the bed. His voice was barely controlled. "Monica. Irene is a surgeon. She is the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital." Monica's first move was tears, big, heaving sobs. I never meant for it to go this far. I was scared for her. She sent letters, I said. My voice sounded like someone else's, flat, hollow. She called 14 times. She asked Ruth to intervene. She's exaggerating. You know how she... We blocked her number. Jerry said. Because you told us to. The heart monitor beeped. The IV dripped. And then because Monica is Monica even in a hospital bed, she pivoted from defense to offense. Fine, she's a doctor. Good for her. But she abandoned this family. She didn't abandon us, Jerry said. We abandoned her. I have never heard my husband say anything like that in my life. I don't think he had either. The effort it cost him was visible in every line of his face. Monica stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was set. For the first time in 35 years, my older daughter looked exactly her age. Then Aunt Ruth walked in. She didn't sit. She stood in the middle of the room and said she had been waiting 5 years to have this conversation, and she was not waiting one more minute. She pulled out her phone, a folder she'd labeled, and I saw this later when she showed me. Irene proof. Screenshots of Irene's emails from those first 5 days, the ones we deleted without reading. The PDF of her leave of absence from Oregon Health and Science, signed by the dean, stamped with the registrar's seal. Her re-enrollment confirmation. A photo of her residency graduation. Irene in a cap holding her diploma. Ruth standing beside her. The only family member in the frame. Mom took Ruth's phone with trembling hands and began to scroll. Ruth swiped to a text. Thread. This, she said, is from Monica, sent to me 4 years ago. She read it aloud. Don't tell Mom and Dad about Irene's residency. It'll just confuse them. They're finally at peace. The room went still. Monica stared at the ceiling. Ruth looked at her. You told me to keep quiet for the family's sake. But this family hasn't had peace. It's had a 5-year blackout. Then she turned to Jerry and me. And you too. You let this happen. Not because you didn't love Irene, but because loving Monica was easier. Nobody argued. I was reading Irene's emails. I had the phone in both hands and my lips were moving, and I was reading my daughter's words from 5 years ago. The words she'd sent from 3,000 miles away, from a hospital waiting room, sitting next to her dying friend, begging us to listen. The last email was dated the day before her residency graduation. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this. I graduated from residency today. I wish you were here. I'm still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter. I doubled over in the chair. Jerry stood at the window, his back to the room. His shoulders were shaking again. Ruth told us later, quietly, that it was the first time in 62 years she had seen her older brother cry. Not at their mother's funeral. Not ever. He cried now, silently, facing the parking lot. You missed her wedding, Jerry, Ruth said softly. Nathan's father walked her down the aisle. Do you understand what that means? Jerry didn't turn from the window, but he spoke. 4 words low, cracked down the center. What have we done? Irene came back that afternoon, end of her shift. 22 hours since the pager woke her. When she walked into the ICU room, I stood immediately. My whole body was a question. I said her name. I started to say, I'm so sorry, I'm so... She held up her hand, gently, but clearly. I hear you, and I believe you're sorry. But sorry is a word. It's a starting place, not a finish line. What I need is time. I nodded. I sat down. Jerry said they wanted to make it right, and Irene looked at him. And there was no anger in her face, which was somehow harder to receive than anger would have been. There was just clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes after you've burned through every other emotion, and what's left is the truth. Clean and simple. I'm not the girl you sent away, she said. I'm not the girl who begged you to listen for 5 days from 3,000 miles away. I'm someone who built a life, a whole life, without you. And if you want to be part of it now, it will be on my terms. Then she looked at Monica. When you're recovered, you and I are going to have a real conversation. But not today. Today you're my patient. I don't mix the two. She left. Spine straight. I sat in the chair beside my older daughter's hospital bed and looked at my husband at the window and thought about the shortbread cookies I made every year for Monica's school events, about the ribbon I never drove 3 hours to watch my younger daughter receive, about the envelope I wrote return to sender on in my own handwriting, about what it means to fail someone slowly, over years, through 1,000 tiny choices dressed up as neutrality. Jerry and I went home that night and sat in the kitchen in silence for a long time. Not the comfortable silence of a long marriage. The other kind. We started therapy in February. Dr. Rena, West Hartford, calm and direct. I took to it immediately. I had been carrying the weight of my own passivity for so long I hadn't recognized it as a weight anymore. The first time Dr. Rena named it, enabling through silence, I broke down in her office and didn't stop crying for 40 minutes. Every time you saw your younger daughter standing in the doorway, quiet and waiting, Dr. Rena said, and told yourself she was fine. Well, that was a choice. Repeated thousands of times. That's not neutrality, Diane. That's a pattern. Jerry struggled. He went, he sat, he answered questions in as few words as possible. Dr. Rena told him his need to be right, his absolute refusal to revisit a decision once it was made, had been the load-bearing wall of the entire disaster. Monica provided the lie, she said. Your pride cemented it in place. He didn't argue with her. For Jerry, that was everything. 3 weeks in, I sat down and wrote Irene a letter by hand. The irony was not lost on either of us that I chose the same method she had used 5 years before, the one I had returned unopened. I won't recite everything I wrote. Some of it belongs only to her. But I said this. I failed you not just when I believed Monica, but every time I chose peace over fairness. Every time I let your father's temper decide what was true. Every time I saw you standing in the doorway and told myself you were fine, because it was easier than admitting I wasn't brave enough to fight for you. I sent it. I didn't know if she would read it. She read it. She told me later, not right away, but later. She read it at her kitchen table with her dog asleep on her feet and her husband in the next room. She held it for a long time. Then she put it in a drawer where she keeps things that matter. Same drawer as her returned letters, she said. Different side. The Physician of the Year Gala was in January. 200 people. A ballroom in Hartford. Jerry wore a tie he clearly hated. I bought a navy dress I hope was appropriate. We sat in the last row, seats quietly arranged by Ruth, who had been engineering things in her careful way and deserved more credit than she would ever accept. I had never been in a room full of people who worked with my daughter before. I did not know until I watched them how they looked at her. The surgical staff rose to a standing ovation when her name was called. The residents in the third row watched her walk to the stage with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression I'd watched Irene wear at Thanksgiving for 18 years, looking at Monica. Attention. Admiration. The quiet hope of wanting to become something. She wore a simple black dress. She walked to the podium and held it like she was born standing at one. She said, 5 years ago I almost quit. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because I lost the people I thought I needed to keep going. What I learned is that the people you need aren't always the ones you're born to. Sometimes they're the ones who choose you. She looked at her mentor, her husband, her team. Then she looked at the back of the ballroom. And sometimes, she said, the ones you're born to find their way back. Late. But here. I covered my mouth. Jerry stood up. He stood up in a room of 200 people for his daughter. My husband, who had once glanced at a second-place ribbon and said, "That's nice." Rennie, without asking what the project was about. Who had told Ruth to stay out of it? Who had said, "She's all we have in a hospital hallway," while his other daughter was in surgery on the other side of the wall? He stood up. The applause filled the rest. After the gala, Jerry found Nathan near the coat check. I watched from a few feet away. My husband stood in front of my son-in-law, a man whose father had walked his wife down the aisle because we weren't there. And he said, "I owe you an apology. I should have been the one." Nathan extended his hand. His voice was gracious and direct, and I understood immediately why Irene had chosen him. "With all due respect, sir," he said, "you should have been a lot of things. But we're here now." They shook hands. Jerry didn't let go right away. His eyes were red. First Sunday in February. Light snow. It's the kind that doesn't stick. Jerry held a bottle of orange juice the whole drive there because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. I had a tin of shortbread. My shortbread, the ones I had made every year for every school event of Monica's and never once made for Irene's. We stood on her porch. She opened the door. Inside, Nathan was grinding coffee and singing off-key to something on the radio. A golden retriever appeared from around a corner and assessed us with professional thoroughness. "Hi," I said. Nervous, hopeful, probably both of those things showing too clearly on my face. "Come in," she said. Coffee's almost ready." Jerry stepped inside. He looked around her kitchen the way you look at a place you've been told about for years and are finally seeing. Cataloging it, measuring it, trying to fit the space into the size of everything you missed. He cleared his throat. "Can I help with anything?" She looked at him. She said, "You can set the table, Dad." He went to the cabinet she pointed to and took out plates and counted them and looked at her. 4? 4. He set them down one at a time, carefully, like they might break. Nathan handed him coffee. I hugged my daughter at the stove. Not a dramatic hug. Not the movie version of a reunion. Just arms around her, forehead against her shoulder, holding on. She let me. She held still. No words. Just that. Hippo thumped his tail against the floor. Snow fell outside. The French toast sizzled. "My name is Diane Woulette. I am 61 years old, and I spent 5 years believing a lie about my own daughter because believing it was easier than the alternative. The alternative was this, that I had failed her long before Monica's phone call. That the pattern, the invisible child, the returned letter, that's nice, Renee with no follow-up question. That all of it had made what happened possible. Monica handed us a lie shaped like something we were already halfway willing to believe. I don't say this to excuse myself. I say it because the truth is the only place any of us can build from now. Irene is the chief of trauma surgery. She is married to a good man. She has a dog named Hippocrates and a house with a porch. That gets good morning light. She built all of it without us. Every brick, every credential, every early morning and supply closet and cafeteria leftover. All of it happened while we were sitting at a kitchen table in Hartford believing the wrong daughter. She saved Monica's life. Not as a gesture. Not as a statement. Because there was a woman on a table who would die without the best surgeon in the building, and the best surgeon in the building was Irene, and Irene had taken an oath, and Irene was the kind of person who keeps her oaths regardless of the cost. That is who our quiet daughter became while we were not watching. Jerry set 4 plates on her table last Sunday, one at a time, carefully. He hasn't said much about the experience. He's not a man who translates easily into words. But when we got home, he took the old frame family photo off the mantel, the one with the 4 of us at Easter a decade ago before any of this, and he set it face down in a drawer. Not thrown away. Not destroyed. Set aside. Then he printed out a photograph Ruth had taken at the gala, Irene at the podium, and he set it on the mantel where the other one had been. He hasn't explained himself. He didn't need to. We are going back next Sunday. And the Sunday after that. We are not showing up with grand gestures. We are showing up with orange juice and shortbread and the willingness to set whatever table she asks us to set, as carefully as she deserves, for as long as it takes. Apologies expire. Consistency doesn't. We are learning that now. 4 plates. It's a start. If you enjoyed this story, you know what to do.